Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It is a little after 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and call the Erie Land Bank meeting for March 21st, 2022 to order. I'd like to start off by seeking a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes from the prior meeting of February 21st, 2022. Thank you, Kathy. The second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. That takes us to finance report.
All right. So I provided you guys the balance sheet and the profit and loss, along with the profit and loss for budget. I sent it as an attachment because our QuickBooks is having a hard time turning it to a landscape so that it's easy to print out. So hopefully you're able to zoom in on that and look at it. So we're still, Carrie's going through and still working on assessing our properties and putting them in as far as valuations goes, asset and liability. So we're working through that whole process. The land bank's certainly going to be a lot easier for us than the authority's properties since these are all relatively new and the documentation should be there. So we'll be able to put in there the documentation based upon what our actual expenses for those properties have been to acquire our liabilities on those properties. So working through that. That's probably about it as far as what she told me prior to the meeting.
So Aaron, is that just for accruing it to the appropriate project? I'm trying to understand what.
Just so that we have an understanding of what our liabilities are as far as those properties, so that in accounting, when we sell one of those properties, it can all be written off and accounted for properly. There's a lot of issues with some of the redevelopment authority properties that they just weren't written off on the books appropriately when they were sold, so that we have the ability now, we'll have all the numbers correct so that we can have that asset versus liability issue.
Maybe that's more a question for Carrie, but
yes,
had we been accruing just to a work plan and not individual projects then?
Yes.
All right. Anybody have any questions on financials? And maybe the deposits on the property sales, maybe we can talk about this when Carrie's available, but just wondering when those current liabilities, like what's the mechanism when those roll off and when do they roll off?
Right, well, there's 3 or 4 of those properties that we have deposits on are with Bayfront Eastside Task Force, and they're still working through with their attorney some legal issues with the properties and getting those titles cleared. So that's what the majority of those deposits are. 1904 June Street, see, there's still a lot of housekeeping. That property we have conveyed to the new owner, so that needs to come off. So we're still working through some of that thing. The accounting that was not documented appropriately back before Carrie
Because it's just started adding up there, and I want to make sure we're not accruing more current liability. So a lot of these, there's a good chance some of these shouldn't be an issue. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I seek a motion to approve the financials.
I'll move to approve.
It's all you. Second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thanks, Aaron. We'll move on to citizens' comments. Did anybody call in?
Nobody had requested to address the board for this meeting.
All right, very good. Let's go ahead and move on then to your executive director report.
All right. So I provided you just the status update on the properties for the 2021 work plan and the 2022. I'll touch on some of the 2021, some of the 2022, and leave some of the discussion for later on in the agenda. Under the 21 work plan, we have 9 properties. Demolition contracts have been signed and provided to those contractors. The one demolition and asbestos abatement at 708 Payne is on the agenda for your approval. We have 2 other properties on that list that we will be sending out for demolition bids later this week, early next. They were just ones that we were waiting on tying up some final legal issues on. 2053 Warfel was a property that we approved the demolition of last month. However, I had an individual come in and he's interested in rehabbing it. And typically I wouldn't say pull it off at demolition, but it's not a very large property. It's a brick property in decent condition. And he did provide some adequate references as far as his ability to rehabilitate the property. So I'm going to put that one out for proposals as the standard, our policies and procedures for 30 days, along with some of the newer properties. See if anybody else is interested, just to provide that equitable and transparent process there. 552 East 24th Street. We were working with the owner who had purchased that at the tax sale prior to our condemnation action. She provided a deposit to her attorney, and then she, a week later, backed out and said she was no longer interested in coming to a relinquishment agreement. So we've secured the property, and we're going to evaluate it. Going to give a little bit of time for cooling off on her case in case she wants to. We're really hoping. We had a very good dialogue with her and her attorney, and thought we kind of had a process in place to allow her to keep that and rehabilitate it, but she has since, like I said, backed out. So that one may be coming down as a demolition here in the next month. So I'll keep you updated on that. And then 1958 Prospect is another one on that plan that we can talk about under the property disposition part of the agenda later. 2022, 13 of the 19 properties that we acquired off judicial tax sale have been determined by the inspectors that they're demolition candidates. There's really not much else they feel could be done to the properties due to either their size or substantial amount of structural deficiencies.
And those are all the new ones that the title's still being
Yes.
quieted
We've
on that.
gotten the title for all of the properties. However, Gene and his team are working through the issues with the deceased owners.
Okay.
On some of those. So it's kind of a mix. There's you can kind of, on the 2022 work plan, it's notated there as deceased, so those will be the ones that we'll have to have the extra legal work done on to make sure that we get clear title on those. And Gene can talk more about that. So, but I guess, yeah, that's my executive director report, and I'll save the rest for discussion later.
So how long do you plan on giving the individual that's looking at Warfel?
What's that?
How long are you going to give that individual time that's looking at Warfel?
Well, with Warfel, I'm going to, when we put some of these properties out for proposals, Warfel was never put out for property proposals, so it wasn't,
Okay.
He just came and he was interested. I told him, however, I can't just solely provide him a sales agreement on it without offering it out to everybody. So my plan is to put that out with some of the judicial tax sale properties so that everybody has the opportunity to provide that redeveloper's proposal to the board. Oh, and then one last, under the condemnations associated with the 2022 work plan, we sent out 66 pre-condemnation letters to 66 of the prioritized properties off the blighted property list. The proposed timeline is that we're giving them individuals until April 1st to respond to that letter. Some way, somehow, come to an agreement, work with the authority and code enforcement to make repairs. And then of those ones that don't come to some kind of agreement, we're going to identify a list of those properties to present to the board during the April meeting. And then on April 19th, which is the day after that meeting, they'll go to, if the board approves that list for acquisition, then we'll take them to the Planning Commission, and then ultimately to the Redevelopment Authority Board for approval of condemnation action against those properties. So if all goes as planned by May 9th, the Redevelopment Authority would approve that list of condemnations, and we would proceed with acquiring those properties on behalf of the land bank.
Okay.
That's my report.
Okay. Any questions? Anything? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and move on to the solicitor's report.
update on the 19 properties that we secured from the tax sale. There is an automatic waiting period of 6 months from the tax sale to when it is marketable. So Aaron and I have been working along with my staff to use that time to clear up any title defects so that that those properties, if they're able to be marketable, we're able to move in that direction. The big concern is a lot of these, and we're finding it more and more, is that the person has passed away and the family is just not doing anything. They're afraid to do something for fear that they might be responsible for taxes or anything. So they just wash their hands of it and walk away and don't make any claim. So what we need to do is there's a process where we submit the information and the values to Harrisburg and show that there really is no value in the property for them to assert an inheritance tax obligation. So there's a process that we're going through to acquire all that information, submit it on those that were in estates or should be in an estate, but the family won't do anything about it, so that we can get that letter from the revenue department saying, yeah, there's no tax owed on this, so that we can then, with that in hand, then market it, sell it, or do whatever we can, knowing that there's no lien or encumbrance on it. So we're going through that process right now. I think I want to say there was 13 of the 19 were people that had passed away. It was a
substantial number.
It was a substantial number, and I'm seeing that on other matters as well, as the families are just washing their hands of it. When mom and dad have passed away, if it's not,
So
if
Gene,
they don't feel this.
so we're getting them to waive any claim before you send a letter to Harrisburg to...
What we're doing is we're being proactive, and we're letting Harrisburg know, hey, look, we acquired these properties at the tax sale. An estate was not opened. We're letting you know there really is no inheritance tax that could be collected on this property because it has no value, or whatever the tax obligations were, they were more than what the value is. So we're, almost striking in advance to get that, so that when we do get the deed from the Tax Claim Bureau, that we've already checked off and there's no liens or encumbrances on this property. So now the land bank can literally market it and or get it to the right people, or demolish it and sell it to the adjoining property owner, something like that. So this is kind of a proactive step, doing it during this 6-month waiting period.
Okay. So these properties then would become available summer?
Correct.
June or July?
Correct. And it may very well be that they come back and they say, hey, you know what, we've looked at it, we think that the inheritance tax owed on this is $1,500. Okay, now the land bank knows that if we go to the neighbor and say, hey, will you buy this lot, we've got to we include that in the purchase price, and then we pay it, and it's all taken care of, so that we're transferring it. So it's almost like good, bad, or indifferent. Let's find out. Let's find out what might be, if any, obligations owed on this lot, and address it, so that when it does come available in 6 months, that we're ready to act. So we're pushing those forward right now to get those in place. So yes, it would be sometime early, midsummer at the very latest.
Okay. 'Cause I actually got a call on a couple of these addresses.
You have already?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So we will just let them know that, hey, it's a work in progress. We've still got to wait that 6 months, but we're doing our due diligence during that time frame, instead of waiting until we get the deed, and then, so I've jump-started it.
Okay,
Okay?
great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Aaron, unfinished business.
All right, so up first, demolition bids of 708 Payne. It's our commercial bar, residential structure on Payne Avenue, asbestos abatements required in the property. So the bids came out at $19,400 was the lowest bid for H.H. Raw Contracting out of New York. Provided all the required bid bond and documentation associated with that. So my recommendation is to award the contract to H.H. Raw Contracting.
Okay. Any questions on this? If not, can I get a motion to approve bid for asbestos removal on 708 Payne?
So moved. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, property disposition. So, as I said, you know, we've evaluated the current property list. We're working through the 2021 plan as far as demolition goes. 1958 Prospect is one property on that 21 list that is in fairly decent shape. Okay, so and then we got the 2022 list, and we've gone through there and we've identified that one, and it's notated on the right-hand side as far as what the inspectors determined as would be the plan for the property. Like I said, 13 of those properties have come back as demolition candidates. So, you know, we would be looking to put those out for demolition bids. We've already started the process of having the utilities disconnected from the property and prepare those properties for that activity. So that's an easy process, so we'll work through that. Now, where we get is with that 1958 Prospect, along with 6 other properties that we acquired from the tax sale, there's some possibilities there. And really, the discussion with you as the board on how we would like to go about that route, and if you're in agreement with my thoughts. Stabilization and developer proposals. As far as the 2022 plan, 5 of the properties are in decent enough shape that, we can offer them out for developer proposals, and they're probably a little bit better than we have had in the past with blighted property acquisitions. They've got their issues, but they're not as far gone. So the thought would be for those 5 properties to offer them out for developer proposals. Now, with that, I think we would get better response. One, trying to improve our advertising and our reach out to the public so that they know they're available. But in an effort through this whole process, it's going to take time. Put them out for 30 days, get the board to approve it. It'll be May before, we could have proposals in front of you for acceptance. So, they're all overgrown. They've been vacant for many years. The yards are atrocious. 2 of them, the garages in the back, the roofs are falling down. They're just a nuisance to the neighborhood. So, my thought with those 5 properties would be stabilization of them. We go in, we clean up the yards, rip out the overgrowth, demolish the 2 garages that need to come down, and then maybe look at either patching the roofs or replacing the roof. And my thought behind that is that we kind of give whoever ends up purchasing the property a little bit of step forward as far as starting the redevelopment of it. We incur a little bit of cost, but we also preserve the property while we wait for this whole process to play out. Like I said, May for proposals, we send them a sales agreement. We might close by the end of June. So now we've had these properties for 4 months, and if we don't do something, then the leak's going to get worse, the damage is going to get worse, and ultimately our value goes down. So for those 5 properties. So I guess I'll stop there for discussion.
So the way that you're able to, the accounting process has changed. Now you're able to track the costs that we're incurring for each of those properties, the costs associated with cleanup, the costs associated with stabilization, and then hopefully capture that back when you sell it or enter into a developer's agreement.
Yes, that would be the thought, is that, instead of putting them out as the minimum of 500, that we associate a starting sale or asking price for those properties to recapture that cost and hopefully generate a little bit more on top of that to cover some additional costs that we would have. Of course, we're holding them, we're maintaining them, we have all that cost over the next 4 months that we have to generate some way. in hopes that, if we do put a new roof on a property, that it does raise that value. It does make it a little bit more of an appetite for somebody to get involved in.
And this is not a practice that you have done in the past, or is it mainly because you have so many properties that are in fairly good condition that they're salvageable, you feel?
It is not something we've done in the past, and primarily because I think they were too far gone. In most of the cases, when we put these properties out for redeveloper agreements, the only one that I can think of was 2501 Brandis. I mean, that was probably the best property, and it's shown it's one of the only ones that has come back as a successful certificate of completion from the land bank. So, there's just a history there that sometimes the properties we were putting under redeveloper agreements may not have been the best choice for those properties. But I feel these ones, they have a good possibility of being great rehabilitation candidates, not necessarily for us, but for somebody else.
I guess it would be good to see, each property individually, how much you think needs to be put into it, and then we can determine if, we think the market would support that investment, and then what we think, may end up selling for. Because I also think there's a tie into some of that home buyer and home renovation funding that we've talked about as well, and maybe there can be an offer that's made to a potential buyer that, if you're interested in a property like this, maybe we can finance it at 1% or something. That's a lot. It gives them a lot more flexibility. Chances are these are not bankable properties, even if they are salvageable. They're probably not bankable. So I still would like to see maybe a tie with that as well, because that flexible capital, I think, is what's going to get. Because you're not talking about $500 or $1,000. Now you're talking about something that may need financed if we're going to invest in these properties.
Right.
So I think we need to make that connection on the back end as well before we venture too far into this, to make sure that we can help people buy these. Because I think that would open a door to a much broader pool of potential buyers, as opposed to just people have to come in and pay cash. So that's my thoughts.
I guess my question would be, so Chris, are you saying that the redevelopment authority rehab these properties and then put them out for first-time home buyer or home buyer?
I don't know, I'm thinking out loud. I guess I'd like to see maybe a little more detail,
Right.
how is this going to flow? Where is, rough estimates for an example property, pick a property that we can kind of study.
Okay. Well, and then I can give you some examples based upon, 616 Payne, 2-unit property right off East Lake Road. Garage is collapsing, yard is overgrown, estimate $1,800 to $2,000 to clean up the yard and demolish that garage and haul it away. And, estimated roof value of $15,000. The roof's, it's been vacant for a number of years, it could utilize a roof. The inside's not bad. It's got some ceiling damage from the associated roof issue, but that's a cost that now, one, it's going to continue to get worse over the next few months, and then a new owner coming in would have to cover that cost. So, Woodlawn Avenue, great brick 3-1 stacked flat. The porch has taken on a substantial amount of damage. It's starting to show some structural instability. It needs to be secured relatively quickly. We'll probably send somebody out to at least facilitate that here in the next week or so, just to prevent any collapse from happening that would result in some catastrophic damage to the front of the house. So just a couple examples there of what we're looking at.
I think, generally speaking, I would like to give it a try. We are in a different real estate market now. We're undersupplied. And so, maybe we try with a property or two. I don't want to go too far into this. I'd like to see the response. I'd like to see the type of applicant and buyer that we might be able to attract. Probably need some more detail, though, before.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I
I
mean,
don't know what your thoughts are on that, but.
I mean, I agree with Chris. I like the idea. It will be a new venture for us, so we'd want to, take our time. But I like the idea, and, it was sort of my thought that this type of process would be incorporated into the overall housing program, because you're already in these buildings, you know the state that they're in, and then you potentially have funding to help people either rehab them themselves and own them, or the redevelopment authority rehab them, and then connect first-time home buyers to property that has been rehabbed properly, which I think is a great, I think the entire initiative, that type of initiative is really where we need to be eventually in Erie. So, and hopefully we get to a point where the land bank is actually looking at more and more properties that are rehabable and not just dwelling. We know what happens when we dwell on the worst of the worst. We just continue to bleed money and not be able to sustain this type of work. So I think this, having a nice balance of rehabable property that the land bank is taking in and then getting back out into the hands of someone who is going to maintain it over the life of that property, and then balancing that with, that's how you fund dealing with the worst of the worst properties as well. So
Right.
I totally support it, and I know we have to step lightly. We don't want to get up over our skis on something like this. But I have faith in you, Aaron, to tell us which properties you think could be rehabbed. I mean, I don't know what the state of the one on Fairmount Parkway is, but the location itself is still a very desirable location.
Right. That one, that Fairmount Parkway, and I didn't get into that, Fairmount Parkway and Prospect are decent properties.
Yeah.
I feel that, the inspectors have looked at them, they've identified the deficiencies. I think certainly, the land bank could invest into doing the minor repairs to the property and easily put them out for home ownership opportunities. I think we could renovate and provide the needed repairs for under $24,000, and it may not get the property 100% there, but it would be a livable, sustainable property that somebody could continue to invest in, and it could be marketed as an ownership opportunity, which we could utilize the housing plan to, incentivize that as well. So, we're working on acquiring that side lot Prospect to make it a larger lot with, a side yard and that. So those are two perfect home ownership opportunities.
Well, I really like the idea of this because it's coming at a time where you have resources like you've never had before in terms of the redevelopment authority. And again, combining that with really needs to be all one package, right? From originating this to, working with these folks through the process, to the financing, to the closing. And so I guess the question is, how soon do you feel that you're going to have some of those financing tools up and running? Because I think this should all be done in concert with one another here. I like the idea.
Right. I think as far as the financing tools, I mean, the housing plan, we signed the subrecipient agreement last week, so that hopefully will be getting processed here, and we'll get some payment here in the coming weeks. As far as some of the financing part of it, that's going to take some time to build, 2-3 months, I think, at the earliest to get all of those pieces in place. We're still, like I said, trying to identify the new director of finance and then hopefully identify somebody to help with the mortgage portion of that. So, we're still working on that. So yeah, I'd say earliest, 2 to 3 months to have all of the financing pieces in place if everything goes well, and still waiting on some answers from the city as far as some of that financing money.
But it would take us that much time to rehab these anyways and get them on the market. And I just think it would be a great, advertising as well.
Right.
Look, great opportunity, low interest financing, or, maybe micro grant or something mixed in with that. So there's a lot of potential. I like it.
Yeah, we have a substantial amount of interest in Prospect, Fairmont, Woodlawn. I mean, we certainly have calling every day is interested in how they put an offer in on those properties. However, I've
Yeah.
told them, we're going to hold off. We want to do something a little bit different. So, I mean, Woodlawn could be a great owner-occupied rental. It's got nice lots right on the skirt of the city. It's a nice piece of property in a decent, neighborhood. It's the worst of the worst on that block. I mean,
Those are the ones I've gotten calls on when I mentioned before. So it's a good sign.
So what, going forward, I mean, what would you like from me, at the next meeting? I mean, you want me to put together get some estimates for rehab, some market study on it?
Yeah, I mean, just a 1 or 2 pager, pick one of these properties and get, and I know estimates are tough right now, because it's a moving target, but kind of a study that we can look at, like, here's the example, here's what we're going to invest, we think we'll need to invest in it, here's what we think the market will support when we sell it, just so that we can, I would just pick a property and focus on one.
Okay. I will put that together. Yeah.
And then from us, how do you see this progressing with the land bank? What sort of approvals do you need from us? Should there be a policy? I mean, how do you, does anyone have any ideas? So we know what we're doing. Maybe it's with the work plan, I don't know.
Right,
when we're
in
approving
the
it.
2022 work plan, of course, we, budgeted in their money for rehabilitation of properties. So the money's in there and approved by the county land bank to fund that. So the money's there. It's just, since this was new, making sure that's the direction the board wanted to go, that we did want to rehabilitate those properties instead of just in the past putting them out for developer proposals and throwing it off to somebody who would redevelop it and do whatever they wanted with it,
On average, looking back over, I know the land bank really hasn't been that active for many, many years, but a few years. How many developer agreements do you think have been successful versus the ones that have not?
Through the land bank?
Through the land, one?
One
Out
developer
of-
agreement has succeeded. We have some
And that's the
issues
one you
in-
were just talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 2501 Brandis, the individual rehabilitated it. I believe he sold it for a little over $100,000. Nice single-family property. Yeah, it came out very nice. But I can think of the one on East 23rd Street. The property still looks the same as it did the day we sold it. West 18th Street, same situation. So I'm in conversations with the one on West 18th Street, but the current owner wants to see if they can convey it to somebody else under the developer's agreement. So, only one shining star out of the other developer agreements.
So I would think that our end game is really, as any land banks is to get these properties back into productive reuse, either as a side lot, as a buildable lot, or as an existing rehabbed property that someone's owning and maintaining themselves. So whatever process we can put in place is my suggestion. Any process we can put in place that does that effective and efficiently. And if a developer's agreement has been our default because it's had to be, then I'm thinking that has not been the most effective and efficient way of doing it. And it sounds like you have to play a much more active role in rehabbing these properties and moving forward. Perhaps that's what we do when it's time to develop the next work plan, is kind of put a goal out there of how many do we actually want that are rehabbable, so we can continue to get enough revenue to deal with the ones that aren't. And does that make sense? It's really a policy or goal setting that we would like to see. And I agree, this is our first time, so let's kind of baby step into it and really get a sense of what we think can be done. We'll see success, we'll see some failure, hopefully more success than failure, and next year we'll be able to say, okay, here's exactly what we want to do year 2 and year 3, and hopefully none of our funding from the county will be diminished and we can continue to work in this fashion.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think we got to give the property a step up in hopes that it has a better chance of succeeding. I mean, because we certainly have the case studies to show that just putting them out there on the street necessarily doesn't always get us
Right.
the best
No.
results.
And they sit there, and that's, and
Right.
continue to be a drain on the neighborhood, which is
Well, the
not
purpose,
what we want.
we're not here to collect, $500 on the front end and close our eyes and hope it works
Right.
out. We've got to get away from this. So,
Yeah.
that plus the financing opportunities, I keep going back to that, but that's key. We've got to have the right flexibility for folks, because these are not bankable. Even after the work that we're suggesting we're going to do, they're probably still not going to be fully bankable type of properties. So I think we need to give it a try, and I'd like to see one property maybe next month with a clear source and use, like here's what it would look like. And then maybe the next work plan, we identify those 4 or 5 or 6 that you think we can do, and pivot, because we need to. So I'm glad you brought this to us.
Yeah, no, I'll put some
good.
stuff together. Absolutely, thank you.
Were you saying,
Nope, I agree with you.
Oh, okay, sorry.
All right, and then the last thing is the Erie Land Bank ethical guidelines that Gene and his team were so gracious in helping put together. So I had sent that out for you to review and hopefully approve this month if you are willing to, if there's no corrections, amendments, or changes to what was provided.
This is what we had amended in an earlier meeting,
Yes,
right? I think we
yeah,
had some
what had been
comments.
sent
and
out
some- Okay,
Previously, I think back before Christmas.
okay. I don't have any other suggestions at this point.
Just a point of clarification, if there is a conflict of interest that we provide to the board in writing, is email sufficient for that notification? Absolutely. Okay. I figured it would be, I just wanted to make sure. It's sometimes the easiest. I remember last time I sent in a letter. It's all through email.
I'm comfortable with the comments and the edits from last meeting, and, we can always edit further if we need to. So,
Absolutely.
okay.
I'm good with it.
So you need us to, Aaron, you need us to
Yes.
move to, okay,
Motion
so
to
can I get a
approve it,
motion
yes.
to approve the ethical guidelines and policy and procedures?
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Awesome, thank you. And that is everything I have under
Okay, thank
old
you,
and new
Aaron.
business.
very good.
And
Board members, any other questions or comments?
No?
No?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for a good meeting. I'm excited to see what comes next month, and
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.
we'll go from there. Okay, for that, we adjourn. Thank you.